Is there any questions out there in the audience? Oh, sir. Right down the far end. Oh, hang on. You have to have a microphone. That's red tape. That's one of the rules.
Yeah. So I like the idea of, if you like, breaking down red tape and laying out red carpet. But it seems to me that why does everything take so long? Decisions seem to be made very slowly about things, and people get frustrated by them. And I just wonder, what was or how did that cycle get broken, if you like, in Tel Aviv to actually, just make decisions? You're never going to get it 100% right.
Yeah. Well, it's a combination of two things. First of all, it doesn't happen so quickly, also in Tel Aviv. And I talked about patience, and within cities, it does take time. We don't like it. It's not as long as we think, but it's long. On the other, the other part of my answer is culture. In Israel, in Tel Aviv, we are not afraid to fail. We do things, even if we're not allowed. We don't ask permission. We just go and do. It's not exactly the way that is over here, and I know it. So it's, I'm happy that you're clapping your hands, but I know a lot of times people don't like that approach. So it is a matter of culture. But this is why you need so much the private sector. Because if somebody's brave around here, it's usually the private sectors. Us, the public sector, the civil servants, we just know how to say no. We don't know how to say yes. So it's a process. We have to, it's like a muscle. We have to train ourselves to say more yes. Because actually, why not? Why not put the duck on the roof? What will happen? He will fly. What will happen?
So Quinn, sitting here quietly, but from someone who's been involved in some reasonable projects and sort of, anything that you can sort of, any observations on that as to that red tape and what could possibly be done, or you will thoughts on it?
Well, I come from a slightly more commercial background. If I was down here, this is what the market garden capital of New Zealand, apparently, for potatoes and onions. Yep. So I got that right. I'd be looking how that's going to... So one thing's certain, eventually that land is going to get turned into housing, eventually at some point of time, and probably beyond our lives. So, because the pressure of population growth will take it. So how do you protect that? How do you protect that in your community? How do you invest money into what makes money for the city or the town? How do you intensify it? You go multi-levels or whatever it might be. So the big thing is to create and generate revenue for your town, so that you can maintain your youth and so you can pay for all these flash community buildings and community hubs that you've got to build to in turn retain your kids and people and to make a city. So that's probably the challenges you're faced with, is you've got Big Brother Auckland breathing down your throat, I would think. And what's that going to look like? Yeah.
Okay, any more questions out there? Neil, hello, mate.
I'm Neil. Cynthia, I'd like to ask you a question. We've got Warkworth up to our far north and down to here. What about the little towns outside of those areas? I keep on banging on about North Korea and South Korea, which is between here and the Waikato. So I've been 70
West
years
South,
in Pukekohe, and we've got a problem with transport trying to get out of Tuakau to here. It's 3.8 kilometres along the railway. And I have a friend over here saying you like cycleways and somehow to walk around this place. What consideration have you guys got from out of town, out of your areas? Yeah.
Sorry about that. Thanks for your question. Look, I think... and I'll have to go back to the patient's story. Auckland is young in terms of the super city, and I deal with the frustration every day of how much we can do and how much we want to do. You know, if I could have $1 for every time I said I wish we could do new roads or well, I actually don't say roads. If I could do more public transport services or more footpaths or more cycleways in this city, I'd probably be able to pay for them. You know, I think we are focusing really intently on within the Auckland footprint, and we are, you know, there's some strategic pieces being done with central government about outside Auckland, specifically to the south, and how we get people through and how we use that corridor to move people into Auckland. But I'm not focusing on that. Auckland Transport's not focusing on that. We're part of the discussion, but we are not the leads on the discussion at the moment. You know, I think it's really hard. And I struggle when I went into public transport to start with. I did rural public transport, and so I'm really passionate about getting rural communities onto public transport and letting them have opportunities, you know, to get to jobs, to get to university, to get to leisure stuff, and to get to other education. And I will be passionate here about that as well. But I want to focus on the Aucklanders, you know, you guys. And I consider you all Aucklanders. I know that you're rural. I'm from a rural background as well. And my family were potato farmers.
You're at home.
There you go. So
Well,
be
no one would have
careful
bought
what
you
you
some.
say. But from England, my potato farmers from background. But, you know, I think we are not, truly, to be honest with you, and I try to be honest with everyone, I am not in the planning space at the moment focused on what I can do for people over the border, and that's probably not what you want to hear, but I'm trying to focus on how we get the CBD centricity or the city, Auckland city centricity out of our planning and start to work out into the regional areas. I'm really focused on that. So, you know, we've got a lot of work to do. So I am mindset on doing that, and I'm certainly not looking over the border. Probably not what you want to hear, but well, I'd rather not. But I am not doing that. So at the moment, I don't have the mind, you know, I don't have enough mind space to be able to do what we have to do for Auckland as a city and to bring the, you know, across the border. I know it's you know, and I can see a lady there wringing her hands going, you might live across the border, do you? Yeah.
Only just.
Yeah, and I really feel for you, but I have to be honest. I will not lie to people about what we can and can't do at the moment. I will focus what I can do to get done. You know, we need to have conversations. We need not to lock people out. Local boards make sure we're trying to get that connectivity, and we don't want to do silly things and, you know, just cut it off at the border. But we do have to be sensible about what we can and can't do.
Thanks. Briar over there. Well, Cynthia's like the regional Shane Jones for public transport.
Hi, thank you. But in fact, just continuing that conversation and perhaps engaging the planners in terms of the new Auckland Super City. The boundary was determined on the basis of physical geography. It was determined on the basis of the catchment of the Waikato River. That doesn't take people into account, and it really didn't take the social geography of this area into account. If you're talking about people, then that's a fundamental flaw. While we would support getting Auckland moving and getting Auckland into public transport and onto trains, this area has become part of Auckland, and the wonderful new suburban train services have actually worked to the detriment of people in this area, because we've lost our express trains. Because once you are committed to a 10-minute timetable, there's no room for express passenger services or freight trains.
Yeah. I don't know if I can respond to that. All good points. You know, I think taking it back to designing public transport systems or any transport system for people is the right thing. You know, we're going to have that discussion, and maybe my mind sight's too shallow. You know, maybe we should be looking a bit broader about what happens with the, you know, but where do we stop it? The next 2 kilometres, the next 10 kilometres? you know, I have a responsibility to Auckland ratepayers and the mayor and the councillors to be fair. You know, I'm not trying to justify what we're doing, I'm just trying to explain it. But, you know, they're all good points. We should be looking, you know, we need to have conversations. I need to understand, and that's why I like to go out into the communities. I talk to the local board all the time. I try to go out into the community and understand, because half the discussion that I have and half the things that I take back and half the things I know about public transport are not Cynthia Gillespie ideas, they're people from the community's ideas. And so, you know, I'm happy to talk to anyone at any time about any issue relating to public transport or transport in the Auckland system. I will never try and lead you down a path, and Auckland Transport won't. We will try and be as open and honest as we can to have open conversations. I think we will only improve the transport system for people inside the boundary. I don't really like to put it like that, but, you know, we're talking like that at the moment, inside and outside the boundary. But truly, you know, we do have to have those conversations about what's sensible for people and how we move people around, because the productivity of Auckland is at stake here, not whether you're inside the boundary or outside the boundary.
If I can just build on that, Andy. So in terms of the engagement that we're right in the middle of right now for the future of Pukekohe, on both the land use future, housing, employment and so on, and also the transport initiatives with NZTA and Auckland Transport, you know, we're certainly keen to hear from those south of the border. I mean, it's artificial in that sense as to where the boundary is. We're well open to feedback south of the border, and the plans that we've drawn up, you know, do take into account growth north and south of the border. So if you feel those plans aren't recognising growth in Tuakau, other parts of Waikato, then tell us that. I mean, we can certainly take that into account.
Okay, yeah, question here, then we'll come over to you.
Hello, Jennifer Shanks here, environmental consultant. I've worked all over the Auckland region, so with State Highway 16, Causeway, Puhoi to Warkworth Road, Northern Corridor improvements. And my question is quite simple, just picking up on what you said, Cynthia, and that is that, you know, you really don't want to provide expensive linear transport motorways and what have you. So the question is, if that's the case, why have we got thousands and thousands of new houses planned for Drury and Pairata and more land zoned? You don't want to provide the transport infrastructure. You know, those two things don't make sense to me. It's like if I want to go into a meeting in central Auckland, which I often have to do, get there at 9 o'clock often, it's a 2-hour drive. If I were to try and catch the train, it would be the same story. Half an hour from my home in Bombay, park my car, get on the train, take the train into town, and then when I get there, somehow get up to the top, to the council buildings or the court or whatever it is. That's only going to get worse, because those houses are going to be built before the mess on the southern motorway is even sorted, let alone all the new houses that you've got planned, that you've done any transport for that. We still haven't got electrification down to Pukekohe, and it's just like, it doesn't make sense to me.
I think all good points, thank you. I think in terms of building a linear city, if I said that we don't want to, it's probably the wrong language. It's probably better to say that it's really expensive to do that. You know, if you give me as much money as you like, I'll build you whatever you want in terms of to make the city work. That's not sensible anymore. That just doesn't work. You just can't afford to build like that. But I think in terms of the linear city, you're not the only linear city of the world. I've come out of Gold Coast, similar scenario. You know, there's some really, really tight geographical issues in Auckland that you've got to deal with. You've got a lot of waterways, which is just gorgeous. I love the place. You've got, you know, you've got a linear city that's being designed like that. What I struggle with is that we continue to have the conversation that the growth is bad. You know, Auckland should be really grateful that people want to come here and live here and be part of this community, and I'm talking the broader Auckland, because it is an enormously attractive country and city, and it's got a lot to offer. Productivity is awesome. You know, I just think, I get all your points, and I can't disagree with any of them. You know, why would we do that? Why would we go land out here? Why would we do that? Well, you've got to do it somewhere. And you've got a linear city. You know, we've got what we've got. We've got to make the best of it. We've got 7,500 kilometres of roads, 7,396 kilometres of footpaths. We've got lots of infrastructure already. So, you know, we will continue to improve it to meet the needs of the community, but we have to start thinking differently. And it's not about transport executives. I can come up with any plan you like about transport, and I can write it down on a plan, and I can make it look pretty and stick it out there for you and talk to you. But it's not about me doing it. We've got to do it together, because all of you in the room will have driven here because no public transport. Somebody got a bike. I know the boys got a bike. They were telling me up the back. They're just going, I rode my bike. Did you have a bike path? Were you
there's
safe?
a little tiny one.
Anyway, the point is, this is a community issue, and you're so right in terms of talking about the community's got to have your face. The face of your community, you've got a deputy mayor sitting there, you've got a local board sitting there and there. They are on my back every day. Without fail, every single day, working for you as a community. We need to all work together. I mean, you're right in what you say, but I have no answers for why it's been planned linear. We got what we got. That's exactly right. The country is linear. You can't do much else. You can't go that way. So, you know, I think we've got no options. So I think we've got to make the best of what you've got, and it's a pretty good city.
Beautiful. Question over there?
It's on? All right, thanks. Yeah, it's Kit Howard, and I'm further up the line. I've come down south to see a different part of Auckland, and it's really interesting. Look, I've heard frustrations and red tape and real problems. You know, one of the things I'm really concerned about is the elite, the best growing soils in New Zealand, which is of a national strategic area. And this comes to the question for the panel, you know, do we let Big Brother down in Wellington through its new Urban Development Authority, which it's going to push through next year, take over, because that overrides the unitary plan. It can set a new direction. How do you see this, if anything, solving some of our red tape, et cetera, et cetera? Thanks.
No one's watching, John. And so, so good question for you is, you know, the threat to your plan, buddy.
Well, the truth is we've yet to find out the details of what the government's plans are in terms of a UDA. There's all sorts of rumours and speculation as to what this Urban Development Authority may or may not do. My own take on it is it'd be highly unlikely to have a UDA that's set up to kind of plan for further and expand Pukekohe beyond what Auckland Council has already gone through with the community over the last 8 years in terms of setting a plan for the way forward. That would be a concern if there was a big further planned expansion through a UDA, but it just seems pretty unlikely, with the land that we've already identified for future growth and very carefully looked at that issue of the prime and elite soils and where the areas are that should be retained. Yes, historically there have been some developments approved on that land, but I think we've landed in a great spot with the unitary plan process to protect those soils from further expansion. So yeah, who knows where that will end up? But my suspicion is it's not as bad as some might be speculating in terms of expansion on great soils and things like that. I don't think that's where the government's really putting its money anyway. That's my take on it.
Beautiful, beautiful answer. Sir William.
Pat, thank you very much for the opportunity. I really want to say thanks for coming out with your conversations today. I enjoyed very much Heila's focus on really vibrant issues, and I hope that we can take some of that away. And I thought her comments about roads was particularly appropriate. We've got jolly good roads, we've just got too many cars on them. And in Pukekohe, we've got a jolly good city, but it hasn't been allowed to expand. The amount of land that the consenting authorities have made available for Pukekohe to expand I think partly because of the elite soils, but most of the eastern side of Pukekohe are not elite soils. I mean, there's tons of room for expansion in Pukekohe, and Pukekohe's got a very good, solid core of infrastructure in terms of services, and has got the capacity to grow. The fact that hasn't grown has actually created the growth centres in other parts of Franklin. I mean, you've got huge growth centres now which haven't got any services, and we're spending mega bucks to get services to them, whereas Pukekohe should have been allowed to grow. And I'm very conscious as an ex-Minister of Finance of the budget problems, but I worry a wee bit about what John and Cynthia said earlier about simply allocating more land for industry in Pukekohe. I don't think that approach is going to help either. What I do think is that we should be concerned about timeframes in front of us. It took us the best part of 3 years to get longer, to get the unitary plan through. We're doing structured planning now, which has been in place for a year and is going to take it another year, maybe longer, to come to fruition. And then there's going to be the need for plan changes after that. You've got a time frame in front of us that puts out the availability of Pukekohe to grow by, maybe a decade. So I just wonder whether we shouldn't be focusing on the things we can do quicker and concentrate our resources into those. And the one thing that occurs to me is the electrification of the railway. Now, that actually would take a lot of that traffic off your roads, and it would, in fact, help this cross-the-border issue too, because the people in Tuakau, now Pokeno, which is growing into a large city, would have access to the electrification into the centre. So I think it's really a question of practical realities of looking what you can do, how you can do it much quicker, and if Pukekohe is going to have more industrial land, which it needs more residential land as well, and it needs the ability to get into the city off the motorways, and the answer seems to be the railway. Now, I know that you've got limited resources, but it seems to me that you should be focusing on doing those things that you can do quickest and get them done and concentrate your resources there. It's going to mean a bit more focus on what's achievable quickly. I'm reminded what Sir John Allen said when he opened the Auckland Harbour Bridge a long time ago. There'd been a huge argument about the number of lanes there should have been on the bridge. Sir John said, well, it's better to build with 4 lanes and get it built than to keep on arguing whether it's going to have 6 lanes. And there's a bit of that around today. We're arguing about options, but we're not making any progress. And I think Auckland Transport, particularly, and the council, need to actually say, okay, we're going to do these things more quickly, which will take pressure off other areas, allow us to use the infrastructure that's in place and let it expand. Don't put pressure on us to have to create long lengths of infrastructure which costs a lot of money just to build new suburbs in different places, and really allow the communities that are established to absorb the growth, the population growth that we've got, where the infrastructure is, allow it to expand, preferably on non-elite soils, and to get that jolly railway electrified and getting people on it, and extend it to Tuakau and maybe to Pokeno, and at least in the sort of time frames we're talking about, in 5 years we'll have seen some progress. You say that you're going to do it tomorrow and we're going to do it in 5 years, then we'll know with some certainty that you're not just going to keep on drawing lines on plans and saying, well, we'll get around to it when we've got enough feedback. The only progress we seem to be making with feedback is that you're analysing the people who are giving you feedback. We know how many Chinese are giving you feedback, we know how many Pākehās are giving you feedback, we know where they live, but we are still drawing lines on plans. And so I don't want to be critical, because I know the size of the problem, but I am very concerned to hear you saying, well, you're just going to enlarge the areas of industrial land in Pukekohe, because without the people to live here as well, to live on that, you're going to get people coming in from out of Pukekohe working on those industrial areas. So there's got to be a balanced approach to allow this city to grow, inspired as we should be by some of the comments from Hilla tonight, and but sort of focusing what we can do practically in a quick time frame to make some good progress, and let's tell the people what we are going to do and what it's going to cost.
So I'll save you, Cynthia and John. So Hilla, so you've heard, so basically, I mean, one of the key things there was Bill saying that we spend a lot of time talking about what we could do and, you know, and what we should be doing, and we argue about it and we plan and then we go out and we consult and then we go again. Have you experienced, I mean, from a Tel Aviv perspective, or have you experienced somewhere in the world where they actually have been able to sort of cut through that process and say, oh, let's just get on with it? You know, is that something that you've experienced, and instead of sort of constantly consulting and asking and too worried about being very risk adverse in our decision making, which I don't say is happening, but you know.
Well, you know, we always want to find those magical solutions and just copy paste and move it to places. We're talking democratic places. I just came from Moscow 3 months ago. They were ready for the soccer, the Mondial, and you should have seen the city. I was there 6 years ago. I didn't like it. Has anybody been to Moscow in the last year? No. Well, I recommend you. They took off red tapes. But sometimes they do it probably in a different way, right? Our culture is democratic, and when it's it's talking, you have bureaucracy. So you have different cultures. Tel Avivians are more pushy. Australians are more tolerant. But things do happen here. And when I came to Christchurch last year, and when I came this year, I did see a lot of changes. And I know that the people around there don't feel that way. So sometimes we feel frustrated about what we have. But if we look at the optimistic way, things are happening. And it's all about you guys. You just have to go and do. So if you'll do it, it will happen.
Right. Hear that, Bill? Right.
Thank you for a good presentation tonight. One of the points that came out was the need for private sector involvement and interaction with the public sector. And there seems to be a desire for more jobs out in places such as Pukekohe, South Auckland, out in the suburbs. On the other hand, you have there's an inbuilt economic incentive for firms to concentrate in central business districts. I'm an accountant. 8 of the top 10 firms in New Zealand have their Auckland offices in the Auckland CBD. And so how do you incentivize firms to base their operations out in the suburbs in spite of the economic incentive to centralize?
So again, there's not a solution, magical solution, but of course the big 5 will always want to be together because it's like a competition. E&Y needs to see Deloitte, needs to see KPMG, needs to see PwC, right? They all need to be in the same area. But if this is a rural area and this is the agriculture economy, so probably new firms or things that are related to agriculture can be here. And how are we helping them? Taking taxes reduction. This is what we did for startups, giving them sometimes, if we have empty places, engaging them to come in. Some social things, some things that we need. For instance, sometimes we all have schooling all over the world. And all schools always needs food, okay? So sometimes instead of finding some private supplier to give that food, maybe the local the local parents can organize that, or different social things that have an impact and have something that we need. So it will never be those big five, but it will be different things that there are needs. And I'm sure if you'll just dig a little bit, you'll find some solutions and some little businesses here that can be pushed, but they need the platform. And this is what we do have, the private sector. We do have the platforms. We have sometimes places like a school that is closed at 4 or 5. What is happening in that school in the afternoon? We have empty buildings. We have, I don't know, different things that we can share and make it easier for the little businesses to go in and to do. So it's about sitting together, public, private sector, and finding those things.
Okay, and last question, because we're getting on. It's been nearly an hour and a half. So just over there.
Hi, I'm kind of really interested in what you've been talking about. It's really topical. The transport piece is obviously clearly hot and on top. But another thing that concerns me is what are we going to do with all the waste that we're going to obviously have heaps more waste, heaps more people. There's not even any public place recycling bins in Pukekohe. So where's all the waste going to go and the drain on resources, water and the wastewater? I'd just like to hear what's been thought.
I can't answer that one.
It'll go on a truck on the road.
It's getting just on the edge of my remit and expertise. So, as a planner, look, I probably can't speak specifically to that. Council's doing a lot in terms of incentivising, facilitating recycling, but there are some big challenges there in Auckland and in New Zealand, as we know. So it's a big challenge in terms of sewage, wastewater, I think you're talking about as well. Capacity's there at the Tuakau plant. So, going to Deputy Mayor. So, that's all been fairly well looked at in terms of waste. So, unfortunately, we don't have a sort of waste expert up here. We do have water care people in the room, though. So, if you're interested, I'll hook you up with
talking rubbish.
Our colleague from Water Care, Ilza, over here.
I wouldn't mind wading in.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you. There's some. These are all problems that we're talking about tonight have been faced worldwide. Okay, so there are solutions worldwide how to deal with solid waste and the three waters and what you've got to do. And it's stuff that we've had to face down in Christchurch as well. Lost to oxidation ponds, people dispersed, populations, and a whole lot of lateral stuff. So I come back to my earlier points. The community of Pukekohe is got to take ownership of what's going to happen with your city. If you want to protect your elite soils, but there's zones over the other side to do industrial, what type of people do you want Pukekohe to grow with? You talked about the 4 houses, somebody did, about the 4 accountancy houses. Things that we're looking at down south and in Wellington is how do we attract those to leave Auckland or locate back down here? What sort of lifestyle can we offer those people? Because some people are getting a bit tired of spending an hour and a half in the car, workers, a little bit older, and not getting to see their kids at night time, and that's got a real issue. And so you'll probably find there will be a bit of a flip, and people will start looking at these communities. That's what New Zealand's about. A lot of offshore people come to New Zealand for this type of community. So how do you attract them? How do you attract youth? What can you do? And I just urge the community leaders to do it yourself, because I've seen places in Christchurch where they didn't take ownership and they've ripped the guts out of our city, okay? And there's no ratepayers contributing to it. So learn from it, take ownership of it. Wellington have learned from it. They're taking ownership of it. Grab it yourselves and protect your land and invite the type of people in the community you want to be in the future going forward. I don't want to sound mutinous at all, but at some point of time, we've got to step up and take ownership ourselves and stop putting our hands out and wait for central government. Okay. Just as an idea, you talk transportation a lot tonight. What about Pukekohe approaching some people offshore and being the first to invent the electric bus or whatever it might be that goes on that motorway. As we said, it's not roads are the issue, and I personally don't want to see New Zealand and our beautiful forests covered with grey asphalt and roads, when in 10, 15 years' time we're going to have these autonomous vehicles and buses. Why don't you invent it in Pukekohe? You make a name for yourselves, you know? Just putting it out there.
And now I was very naughty in that we had one more and I missed them. So just the last question, just in the back row.
Kia ora koutou. My name is Edith Tuimata and I'm part of the local iwi of Ngāti Te Ata. I've just got a few questions. I'm sorry it's like the tail end of everything, but Cynthia, there is without a doubt going to be 50,000 homes come online in the next 5 to 10 years, so the connecting part of it really has to happen. Why can't you have a collaborative approach and work with the private developers in developing these networks and trying to get the best out of that? That's the first sort of question I've got. For you, John, I've got another one. You know, you want to bring in jobs and everything into this particular area for the sector, for the private sector and everything like that. But this is traditionally a food bowl area. This is where we've always grown our crops. Mairango from the beginning of time as iwi has perceived it. So is there any way where we can keep that sort of growing soils intact on this side here? Because those 50,000 houses are going to come online. How are we going to feed them if we're not going to have the food bowl still here? And with the growers and the horticultural people, the further you move them out of Auckland, the less viable their businesses are going to be becoming. So that's a question for you. And then for you, Hela, you talk about a cultural identity and everything like that. For everybody, really, you know, our stories as iwi is our unique perspective that New Zealand talks about promoting, you know, this unique perspective. And it's our Māori culture and our cultural heritage that does this. So for all of you, how are you going to provide for that unique cultural identity? Kia ora.
I will start with the Maori, which I admire so much. I think when we talk about here, we talked about Puki, and Maori is part of all of New Zealand. So this is an issue, just like in Israel, we have our Arabic background, but it's not specific for Tel Aviv, and it's not the USP of Tel Aviv. Same here for Puki. Maori is all over. You are part of the history of this land, but you are not the story of this land. You are part of it, if you understand what I mean. And it's not anything offensive or anything against. On the contrary, you are part of it. And I think each city in the world has a collaborative story, but it needs to find that one thing that is really, really, really unique there. And the Maori is part of the story, but it's not the unique issue of Puki. So this is just to put this in context. Back to you.
Kia ora. Look, continue to engage with Ngāti Te Ata and all mana whenua who have historical links to Pukekohe is critical. Council has done that over the last few years and is committed to continuing to work with you and other mana whenua to figure out exactly what the best future is for the land that's been identified for Pukekohe to grow. In terms of the soils, as I mentioned before, most of the soils have been protected by setting a boundary and saying no growth beyond that. And there's been a land identified, you know, that was inside that had good soils that's been sort of no longer earmarked for development. So a lot of work has been done to try and protect this area as the football. And I think that's a good key point, that is part of the economic future, is kind of expanding on, building on that history, that legacy of businesses involved in food production in this area. So, yeah. I haven't got any ideas about the specific ways. That's why we want to continue to engage on what, you know, what that might look like in terms of recognising mana whenua in this place.
Kia ora. Thanks for your questions. You know, when you talk about engagement, Auckland Transport and everybody will sigh in the room, are really serious from my perspective and what I see in the organisation about consulting with the community and mana whenua. And we often get criticised for not listening, but we're trying to turn that around in terms of, you know, who do we listen to in the community? We have to listen to everyone, and everyone's got a right to have a say, I think. But we do work with private developers as well. We get lots of good input. We don't do everything right all the time, and we know that and we acknowledge that, and we're trying to work on that. We won't be perfect all the time, but we are trying to do the right thing by the community and listen to the community and engage with everyone. Transport systems are historically hard to retrofit, expensive to put in greenfield. So whichever way you go, it's a difficult task. But you know, I think some of the designs that have been done by Auckland Transport in some of the new bus terminals and ferry terminals align with the community and the historic importance that mana whenua will bring to Auckland. So I think we do try to do that. Are we experts at it? I don't think we're experts at anything. We don't proclaim to be experts at anything. We just try our hardest, so we'll keep trying.
Okay, thank you. And so I do have a heap of questions here, but I think we can answer them, you know, online. It was good to be able, and actually I pushed the button, I wasn't looking on the right screen. So that's my fault, those people out in the wide world who've sent, I know from some of the questions who you are. Right. We'll get back to you on those questions. But it's now sort of 8:30 and we've been going for an hour and a half. And so I'd now like Deputy Mayor Bill Cashmore to come on up and to basically give a dissertation as to what you did in the... No, you can give a vote of thanks.